Welcome to American Issues Take One. I'm Tim Apicella, your host. Today's title is Justice Thomas, 20 Years of Silent Gifts. You know, in the spirit of that title, I'd like to read the following quotation by Seth Godin. Seth Godin is a former Deal.com owner, and he's a business author, and I think he's an instructor as well. He said the following: I found that giving gifts is transformative, makes me better. It clarifies my thinking and allows me to do better work. Well, in that spirit of that quotation, Harlan Crow, an extreme Christian conservative, a billionaire, has been thinking and doing better for over 20 years, because over 20 years, he's been gift giving to Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. And so the question is for today is, to what degree of influence have all that gift giving for 20 years had an influence on Justice Thomas? And to discuss that, we'll go to our guests. With me today, I have my co-host and back from his travels, Jay Fidell, and our special esteemed guest, Chuck Crumpton. Good morning, guys.
Morning, Tim.
Morning, Tim. Hey. Good morning, Chuck.
Hey, what a title. What a concept that we have a Supreme Court justice that's been taking, without disclosure, lavish luxury gifts for over 20 years. And so to you, Chuck, when that story first broke, what was your initial reaction to it? Business as usual, or were you all surprised?
Well, I mean, for Justice Clarence Thomas, it's business as usual. For those of us who remember back to the days of Anita Hill before his appointment, his style and attitude really haven't changed over the years. It's just become more blatant and more in your face over time as he's acquired more seniority and more influence in the now very right-wing dominant court. But I think we also got to recognize the media has had some shortfalls here too. I mean, not one of them has mentioned that Harlan Crow's influence pales in comparison to his grandfather Jim's.
Apparently not. It's hard to follow when Chuck throws me that curveball like that. Jay, would you like to opine as to what your initial reaction was when you heard about Justice Thomas? And well, let's talk about the gifts. I mean, my gosh, he's been on 164-foot yachts, ferrying them out to Indonesia and where else? Bali, been out to Bali and all sorts of places. Been on his corporate jets and out in California at retreats, all over the country in a corporate jet. If Justice Thomas had to pay for that out of his own pocket, we'd be well over $500,000, if not more. What do you think, Jay? You were a judge, weren't you?
In a manner of speaking, but you know what struck me, you guys, about it is your title. Your title about, 20 years of silence. The fact is that when the court asked questions of the litigants over Justice Clarence Thomas's seniority on the court, he didn't. He never had questions. And everybody wondered why. Why does this justice distinguish himself by being silent, case after case, hearing after hearing? And some people thought he really was not up to the standard intellectually. By the way, I'm in that camp. And wondered why he was silent all the time. So, your title here, Tim, is a double entendre. He was silent in so many ways. He distinguishes himself from the other members of the court in so many ways. The other element here is that, and I think it has to be stressed, is that Thomas has not been friends with, what's his name? This billionaire.
Harlan Crow.
Harlan Crow is now a famous person. He wasn't so famous before last week. But he didn't know He didn't know Harlan Crow before he got on the court. He only met Harlan Crow a few years after he got on the court. And what does that tell you? That tells you that Harlan Crow approached him. Harlan Crow wanted to have influence. He wanted to own Clarence Thomas. So he sidled up to him and offered him these gifts. And that really makes it stinky, in my view, because it's an obvious manipulation. He was using his money and his yachts and summer homes and whatever else he has all around the world in order to subvert Clarence Thomas. If he had known him when they were kids in high school, that's one thing, but that wasn't the case. They went to different high schools, I'm sure. And so, that's troubling also. The third point I want to make to respond to your question is, I'd like to offer right now today the second bedroom in my home to Clarence Thomas, and we'll make him a nice meal. We'll make him sushi, whatever he wants, and we'll take care of him here at home. As a matter of fact, I'll offer that to Justice Roberts too. They can all come around. All the Republicans on the court, they can come around, and let's see how friendly they are to me. I promise here now today to you guys, I will be friendly to them. I may not have big yachts and homes in Bali, but I can offer my second bedroom, and we can be friendly and have good conversation.
You better have a permit from the city and county of Honolulu for creating a B&D illegally.
Yeah, if I see you parading outside my home, I'm going to know what's going on. In any event, I find it really interesting that his friends are limited to people who can offer him billions of dollars of benefit like this. It smells. The whole thing smells. And his defense, if you will, that somebody unknown. Chuck, you'll agree with me that when you make a statement like that, somebody advised me it's okay, and you're a Supreme Court justice, don't you think it's incumbent on you to have a little footnote there and say who it was and what authority there is for this statement? He didn't say that. He said someone advised me. Can you imagine arguing a case in front of the Supreme Court, Chuck, and saying, the reason I'm taking this position is that somebody advised me it was correct? Really now? I mean, it goes back to the question of just how good a judge this man is.
Well, he's a judge. He's a Supreme Court justice. Isn't there a code, a book of rules about accepting gifts or not accepting gifts, or at least accepting gifts and disclosure about it? Don't judges actually kind of know about rules and where to find rules?
No and no. What's your next question?
Well, if that's the way it's going to be, Chuck, to you. Let's talk about Harlan Crow and the various organizations he's either representing or has given to. Liberty Central, that is the nonprofit, extremely right-wing advocacy group founded by Jenny Thomas, Clarence's wife. Any guesses of how much Harlan Crow gave to that organization?
500,000.
Winner, winner. Bing, bing, bing. Yep, that's exactly how much he gave. He also belongs to the Supreme Court Historical Society. By the way, they get access to all the SCOTUS judges and have discussions with them. He's given over $10 million to various right-wing and Christian organizations.
What are friends for? But to help each other out.
Here's the question, Chuck. To what degree would a human being be influenced by all these lavish gifts? Or is Clarence Thomas just above the fray and wouldn't influence him in the least for any decisions he's made over the last 20 years?
Well, a couple of things. I mean, one, his attitude from the beginning, and I think the Anita Hill situation brought that out clearly, it was one of literally unbridled arrogance, and it's grown over the years. Little did we know before the Trump years that narcissism could be contagious. So I'm more concerned about the influence from his spouse, who may very well have been the first connection to Harlan Crow and people like that, Leo Leonard, the head of the Federalist Society, and the others that are part of that group. So that this may not be a situation of Harlan Crow bragging, my one black friend is a Supreme Court justice, but one in which he says, my friend's husband is a black Supreme Court justice.
Right, right. So if you're Chief Justice Roberts, and it's your job to make the Supreme Court look as credible and with as much integrity as possible. If you're John Roberts right now, particularly after they had the huge leak of Dobbs, that pre-decision leaked out of the Supreme Court, and now you have this news story on your doorstep. If you're John Roberts, what are you thinking?
Well, I mean, if you're John Roberts, because you're looking at your personal legacy, I mean, ego is a factor for all these guys. It is certainly more than good judgment or judicial integrity. You're looking at, hey, I don't control the majority anymore. Alito does, or maybe we should call him Alico, given the history of Dobbs and the other case before that that's come out. So if Roberts wants to have any influence on the official actions and decisions of the Supreme Court, he should take Justice Thomas's clear message to all of them when he was put under investigation for this, or rather under scrutiny for this, back the bleep off. Thomas's immediate response was to point the fingers at the other guys. He has now made it crystal clear to every one of the other reactionary right-wing justices, if this becomes uncomfortable for me, it's coming down on you.
Well, I think really Roberts is the Chief Justice, so that means more than opening the courtroom door in the morning and closing it in the evening. It's got to mean more than that. And although it's not like any Chief Justice in the history of the country has taken the reins, if you will, as Roberts now should be taking the reins. There's no reason why he can't. It may be too late because he's kind of given it up. He's kind of gone along with the program, and he has not taken any action, as Chief Justice to deal with Clarence Thomas. But theoretically, to me, I think he could, or he could have. He could have said, "Look, I'm investigating this. This is wrong, and this is below the standard of our court." I don't know if you've seen this, but there was a piece on PBS recently where they found some footage of Warren Burger on the Second Amendment. I don't know if you saw that. It was beautiful, and Warren Burger had this really deep, mellifluous voice, and this is before he died in the 90s. And he said, if I were going to write the Constitution now, I wouldn't have a Second Amendment. It's been so twisted, so perverted, so badly interpreted that it has no effect except a bad one on the country. He was very matter of fact about it. I said to myself, now this is a Supreme Court justice. I mean, I don't know if he took this position while he was on the bench, but everybody saw him as the Chief Justice. I don't know why Roberts can't do that today, and I think part of this has to fall on him. Right. He could have done something, and arguably can do something now to make it clear. And I commend AOC for getting out there on the media and saying this man needs to be impeached, because you can't lose confidence in the one top judicial institution in the government in the country. And Clarence Thomas and Alito too they have lost public confidence completely over the past, year, maybe? And they've been revealed. They revealed themselves. And as you have said, Clarence Thomas isn't doubling back on this.
Okay, let's go to that point. I mean, why didn't Chief Justice Roberts, take issue with Alito for being the source of the Dobbs leak? You used to say, and I love when you said it, que pasa? I mean, that was a pretty serious breach of information. And what were the ramifications that Justice Roberts handed down?
Well, nothing, Burger. Nothing, Burger.
There's a Spanish response to the que pasa.
Yeah, which is?
SOCKS. That's the way it is.
Okay, that's the way it is. But what you have is a broken court. It's fair to say it's not just Clarence Thomas; it's the others around him. I mean, that your image, Chuck, is good. Hey, Clarence, come into my office. I got to talk to you. We got to have a little conversation right now today. Why weren't voices raised about this? They all sat nicely in their chambers, taking their salary home and doing bloody nothing about correcting the image of the court. And right now, the image of the court is really at a dead low. You can say, well, the court made mistakes, Dred Scott, for example, along the way, but this is below anything they have ever done or not done. It's embarrassing. You get three branches of government, and one, I want to talk about Congress, one is failed. Who would appear? I was thinking of the Man in Gold, remember the Woman in Gold. Remember the Woman in Gold, a movie about a young lawyer who represented a woman who claimed the Klimt painting in Austria. And he was, in his 20s. And he went in front of the Supreme Court of the United States to try to, force the country of Austria to do arbitration over his client's claim. And he was just a young kid. And he recently talked about this on one of the, YouTube shows. And it was quite remarkable. He said, I figured I was going to lose. And I went in there trembling. And lo and behold, they agreed with me. And it was remarkable because nobody expected they would agree with me. I said to myself, how interesting, because now you can predict where this court's going on every politicized issue. You know what's going to happen. You know how corrupt it is. You know about, the $500,000 and all that stuff, and the problems within the court, the problems about the rules of ethics, the problems about why don't they just bloody talk to each other. And so I feel that they have lost all credibility, and it's
well, what happens to society when you're final arbitrator of the law? No credibility. What then, Jay? Same question to you, Chuck.
Impeachment. Got to clean up their act. Somebody has to step in. That's why we have the balance of power among the three branches of government. If we had a working Congress, by the way, we don't. Did I mention that? If we had a working Congress, a proper Congress, a moral Congress would step in and impeach this guy. And that would send a message, A, to the rest of them, you got to follow some sort of ethical standard. And B, it would send a message to the country and the world that we do care about the ethics of our Supreme Court justices. But we're not doing that. And that's a failure. And it has profound effect.
Chuck, do you have a thought on that, my question?
No, I think Jay's point is critically important because we now have two extremely badly broken branches of American government, the federal judiciary and, as Jay points out, the Congress. We've got a party who has, if nothing else, it must be said, put the dis in dysfunctional.
Or the fun in dysfunction.
Well,
the problem. I would like to think that AOC can gain traction on this. Now, you can tell me, Jay, what have you been smoking that you think the broken Congress is going to agree with AOC? She's a left-wing, wild woman and all that. Nobody is going to vote with her on the question of impeaching Clarence Thomas. However, it accentuates the fact that somebody, will somebody in power please stand up and call a spade a spade? If somebody in power please stand up and say this is wrong. And at least one person is doing that. I know there may be others, but she's the one most recently where she got up and she called him out. So I think that Joe Jones in the middle of Missouri, he may not agree with her, but at least he can hear her talking. At least he can hear two hands clapping on this. Otherwise, they get away with it. And there are people in the country that say, good for Clarence. He is representing, the right wing, and we need to support the right wing. And he's totally right. And is so happy that this billionaire is influencing him. Somebody has got to be the second hand clapping, and the more of those, the better. And that's why I'm glad we're discussing this, but I wish more people would discuss it.
So, Chuck, last year, I believe the Senate Judicial Committee passed a bunch of ethic rules, specifically centering around disclosure. I don't know all the details of what they passed, but Clarence Thomas basically said, well, from here on in, I will follow those new set of rules. Does that absolve Clarence Thomas of his 20 years of gift taking?
Clearly not. No. I mean, let's put this in perspective. There are essentially no enforceable standards to which Supreme Court justices whose decisions are final unless they get replaced with people of a different political perspective who choose to change them, as is happening now. And they have lifetime tenure. So they have essentially irreversibility and impunity. If you combine that with the fact that the whole process has become overtly politicized, there is no more judicial integrity at the Supreme Court level or in the federal judiciary on a widespread basis. There is no judicial independence in the U.S. Supreme Court or in the federal judiciary on a widespread basis. What do you have left?
Well, I guess that's the question I was trying to ask earlier is, what's the ramification to our society when the final arbitrator of law and justice is tainted by the influence, or a flavor of influence? Do you now start to ignore every decision the SCOTUS comes up with because you just think they're crooked? I mean, what's the impact?
No, you go to the Republican mainstay, which is, well, but we still have the Second Amendment.
Well, not even the GOP. What about the Democrats saying, okay, Justice Thomas was the final deciding vote on a major decision. I don't know what decision that may be, but let's discount his vote because he's crooked.
Well, yeah, let's look at that for a minute. There are people on both sides of the aisle now that are saying, if they rule against me, I'm going to ignore them. To wit, you can help me on the detail of this, but the governor of Massachusetts on the morning after pill, I'm not going to follow what they say. And I think there are other situations where the Republicans would say the same thing. So the court has lost a certain amount of its power because it doesn't have the confidence of the public, of either side. That's what's happening, and I like to predict right here and right now with both you guys. This is a trend that is going to present itself again and again until they fix their image, until they recapture the trust we had in them before. They're going to be less influential in the legal world. People are going to find a way around what they say, or they're just going to flat out ignore it. And so if you disagree, come and get me, that sort of thing. This is a tremendous undermining of the efficacy of our democratic government.
Well, what's the end result? Is it potentially violence in the street, protest in the street?
Depends on the issue, but that's entirely possible.
I can think of an assault ban that's performed in one state, and It's been judged, and ruled by a judge, and then it goes to the appeal process. And I can see the Supreme Court actually upholding it. And then you have a whole sector of half the population of this country thinking, I don't care what they say. It's my AR-15, and I'm keeping it, and I'm bringing it out in the streets. Who's going to stop me?
Yep.
Well, and there are divisions and struggles, battles, even within those branches. Certainly Congress, we've seen it for years, but now in the judiciary, literally within a day or two after Judge Kaczmarek, the Trump appointee, came out with a seriously factually and legally flawed decision against the FDA approval 20-something years ago of mifepristone, which has proved to be one of the safest drugs on the market. I mean, FDA has problems, but that's not one of them. A Washington state judge came out with exactly the opposite position. So his is going to the Ninth Circuit, Kaczmarek's is going to the Fifth Circuit.
And the FDA says, what do we do?
And some people say, nothing. You have the discretion which policies and rulings you choose to enforce and which you prioritize. And if you don't choose to prioritize and enforce this one, so be it. There are a number of state attorneys general out there who are saying, we're not going to enforce these 150-year-old, 200-year-old anti-arbitration laws.
Yeah, I mean, what we have is chaos.
Yes.
And I'd like to track it back for a few years and say, and this goes back to the beginning of our Trump Week show, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, where we predicted that that under Trump, things would be unleashed. Under Trump, there would be chaos. And ultimately, as you suggest, Tim, there would be violence in the street. Because if you don't have a system of rule of law, or if you have a system that nobody abides by, then controversies get resolved in the street. And I think the failure of the Supreme Court, that's what we have here. The failure of the Supreme Court, on top, as you say, Chuck, of the failure of Congress, will lead us to the resolution of disputes and public policy issues in the street. We're at an inflection point. Clarence Thomas is an inflection point. Mm-hmm. It was bad before, but now it's very stark, and there's no solution visible.
Yeah, well, we've run out of time, but I'm going to ask the last question, and that is, does Justice Thomas continue to accept gifts, but now he discloses them? Or does he not accept the gifts and realizes it's not a good look? What do you think?
Well, he said that there were new rules. It reminds me of Bill Maher and his new rules, you know. He said there were new rules and he would follow them. The problem is the new rules are only in place, less than a year. And arguably, and I'm sure this is the position he would take, they didn't exist before then, at least not, for the Supreme Court. And therefore, what he was doing all those years with this guy Crow, was okay. And because he had the authority of some unknown anonymous individual person who told him it was okay. So that was okay. He's not going to go back and return the gifts or anything, or even apologize for them. But I think now he's probably committed himself to not doing any more of that, probably. But we'll see, and it's up to the press to follow him around and make sure that, he follows through. This does not correct the situation. The die is already cast on him. He's finished, and he's fallen from grace permanently for most of the country. Even people on the right wing, they can't trust him, to be an independent judge. How incredible it is to find a Supreme Court judge who is not independent. Wow. That is really banana republic. Well, what would you add to that, Chuck?
Well, I think Thomas has made it crystal clear exactly what he intends to do. He said, okay, the guidelines have been changed, so I will disclose. There has been not a single word from him that he and Jenny, who probably calls the shots, are intending in any way to give up or back off on or reduce the lavish
Yeah, I
hospitality.
take your point. He didn't say he would stop taking the gifts. He only said he would disclose them. Right.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. So
isn't that a Trump double down, triple down?
It
same
goes
old,
back to
different view.
Trump and Trump's play, Trump's technique.
Yeah.
He's doing the same thing that Trump would do.
Pretty much. All right. Any last thoughts? You guys want to leave us before we sign off here?
Yeah, I feel that and Chuck can speak to this as a practicing lawyer and all, and I would speak to it. And every lawyer I know, we went to school and had case books of thousands of pages of Supreme Court opinions, and we were told and taught that whatever the Supreme Court did, that was the law of the land, and it was the firmament of justice was there in all of that opinion writing by that court, and we have respected that, integrated it into our legal thinking all these years. Come to find now that you can't feel that way, or you shouldn't feel that way anymore. The Supreme Court is not the final arbiter. The Supreme Court is not independent. The Supreme Court is corrupt, and that is such a disappointment to the bar. And my closing point would be: where is the bar? Where is the bar? Let me say that again. Where is the bar? There are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of lawyers in this country. Where are they?
Good point. Chuck?
When you have a system that very clearly imposes much, much higher standards on private arbitrators for disclosure and for setting aside their decisions, as a matter of law, as the Hawaii Supreme Court does, if there's even a hint of, even a remote business or personal relationship, and every trial and appellate judge in the country other than the Supreme Court are held to some standards of judicial disclosure and recusal and vacature of their decisions, except those 9. Of those, Clarence Thomas has now competitively taken the lead over Justice Alito in proving who is the most arrogant.
Wow.
Wait for Alito's next turn. He'll be
there.
back.
It is. All right. We are out of time. I want to thank Jay Fidell, co-host, and our special esteemed guest, Chuck Crumpton. Thank you for joining us on American Issues Take One. I'm Tim Apicella, your host. Won't you join us next week? And until then, aloha.
Thank you so much for watching ThinkTech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please like us and click the subscribe button on YouTube and the follow button on Vimeo. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and donate to us at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.